What do a car, a cell phone, a copyright, and a cat all have in common? They're all personal property. But the legal lines between the types of property matter a lot more than you might think. So in this video, we're going to talk about the differences between personal and real property. We're also going to talk about how people own property. So personal property, or what is property in general? It entails items that are capable of being owned. So what's property law? Well, it consists of the legally protected rights and interests a person has in anything with an ascertainable value, and it could be subject to ownership. So let's get into more details. Property can be classified as real or personal, or tangible or intangible, or public or private. So we'll distinguish real and personal property in our next few slides. But tangible and intangible, well, physical objects, a car, tangible and intangible might be a copyright. Public or private, it's property that can be owned by the government, it's public, or private individuals. So what's the difference between real property and personal property? Real property is land and everything attached to it, including what's in the ground, like minerals, oil, trees that are attached, things that are permanent, a house, a shed, a barn. Real property is discussed in a whole nother video in detail, but for distinction purposes, that is what real property is. If something doesn't fall in the realm of real property, it's personal property. So anything else, cars, clothing, books, cell phones, pets, copyrights, trademark, even goodwill, if we're talking about a business that has goodwill, anything that's not real property is considered personal property. Real property can become personal property when things are removed from the real property or the land. Example, like cutting down trees or harvesting crops. If the trees are attached to the land and you sell the land, it's considered real property. If they're cut down and then taken off for logging purposes and then sold, those trees once cut down are considered personal property. Same thing with, growing corn. You plant corn, it's growing, it's attached to the property, it's considered real property. Once it's removed, it's going to become personal property. Personal property can become real property. So buying shrubs and trees from a nursery, they're personal property. Once you plant them on your land and they start to grow or they're planted, they're going to become real property. The lumber and bricks sold at Lowe's that are used to build a house, personal property at that point, but after the building and house is erected, it's going to be considered real property. We call these fixtures. Once it's personal property, and then it becomes affixed to real property, and it's relatively permanent, it's going to be part of the real property. We call those fixtures. So at the beginning, we defined what property law is, consisting of the legal protected rights and interests a person has in anything with an ascertainable value that is subject to ownership. So how does the legal system play its role? Well, the laws define the right to use property, to sell property, to dispose of it, and to prevent trespass upon it. So let's talk about owning property, property ownership rights. It's referred to as title. The right of ownership in property is referred to as title. A person who holds rights to the property is said to be the owner in fee simple, meaning they own it outright. They have the utmost control over that property. They get to decide how to use it, possess it, dispose of it. If they still own it upon their death, they can say who gets it, in a will. In the end, they have a right to pass it along to heirs or somebody or something else, like in a trust or to a library, something of that nature. But you have ultimate control over the property. People who share ownership rights, and this could be either in personal or real property. This type of ownership is the same. So is the fee simple. So people who share ownership rights simultaneously in particular property are said to be concurrent owners, and we have two types. We have tenancy in common and we have joint tenancy. Tenancy in common, probably the most common way of ownership. Each owner owns an undivided fractional interest in property. So 4 people own a car or a home or a copyright or a business or an airplane. They each have a 25% undivided interest. When one of those folks dies, their percentage will pass to their heirs or to whoever they designate to get that interest. It does not go to the other 3 owners. So this is what we mean by tenancy in common. The owners each have an undivided fractional interest in the property, and that interest is considered personal property and it is transferable. We also have joint tenancy. It's co-ownership of property in which each party owns an undivided portion of the property, but on the death of one of the joint tenants, his or her interest automatically passes to the others. So if the parties wish to acquire property, a group of people, 2 or more people, desire to have an arrangement where they own property, but the intention is if one of them passes, the property will go to the other person. They have to designate that, because if the parties acquire property together, how they hold ownership, if it's not specified, the courts will conclude the ownership is tenancy in common. So if this is a type of ownership a group of folks want to hold property as, they have to designate their ownership as owning as joint tenants. How do we acquire property? Well, the most common is we buy it. But we can acquire property other ways. We inherit it. If we don't inherit it through a will, somebody's left it to us in a will. If somebody dies without a will, the state laws will designate how that property gets distributed. We call that intestate or intestacy laws. Other ways, well, somebody gives it to us. We get it as a gift. We find it. There's possession or capturing that property, accession, and confusion. Now, those 2 you may not know much about, so we're going to go into these other ways. In the next video, we'll talk about how we acquire by gift, because it's not just here you go. There's actually some rules regarding gifting and whether something constitutes getting a gift or somebody giving a gift. How we find property, we'll talk about accession, confusion, and how we capture or potentially by our own possession of property, we get to keep it.